My next guest has jumped out of helicopters Navy SEAL style, and she's bungee jumped off of cliffs, but she still says that she's terrified of being truly seen. And she's here to talk about her journey from a rock bottom suicide attempt to becoming what she likes to call an inner glow coach. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Angie Hawkins. Angie's an inner glow coach and the author of the raw and very vulnerable memoir, Running in Slippers. Angie helps high-achieving women stop dimming their light so they can be loved and learn to love themselves so deeply, the world can't help but reflect it back. Hi, Angie. Welcome to Flip Your Mindset.
Hi, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
So, Angie, I wanted to have you on today because I think a lot of our work aligns. And you've written a memoir. I've recently written my own memoir, which is coming out towards the end of this year. And, I know that in your book, you talk about how 5 years ago, there was a suicide attempt and that kind of cracked open everything for you. And I was wondering if you're comfortable talking about that with us today and tell us what was going on there.
Yeah. And actually, first of all, I want to say thank you for allowing this platform to talk about it because it's actually a very heavily censored topic. But I don't think we're talking about it enough because so many people struggle with mental health issues and have these thoughts and feelings. But when people aren't allowed to speak on it, you feel very alone and isolated in your experience. I'm going to give a little longer version of the story because I feel like if I talk about it in isolation, it almost seems like over dramatic. So I like to put it into context. It started in my childhood, which is where most of our origin stories start. I grew up in a home. The most simple way to say it is both of my parents were extremely emotionally unavailable. And as an adult, I understand what that means and I understand why they are the way they are. And I have the tools to cope with that. But as a child, I didn't have those tools or knowledge or anything. So the way that I interpreted the situation was that I developed this belief that I didn't deserve to be loved. And as you're probably very aware, your beliefs dictate your behaviors, which dictate what you experience in your life. So, needless to say, I struggled for a very long time in my life because I had this critical inner voice that was always telling me how horrible I was and nitpicking all of my perceived imperfections. I was a people pleaser. I was always reaching for love and approval and things outside of myself because I didn't feel like I was inherently worthy of those things. And even like another layer of that was I didn't even feel worthy of a happy and fulfilling life because obviously, like when you're a perfectionist and people pleaser and you're always like in this hamster wheel, it's very unhappy and unfulfilling. And I was aware that I felt that way. But I didn't even think happiness and fulfillment was even available to me. So any attempts of healing were just kind of half-hearted because it was just like feeling good in the moment and then going back to my old behaviors. And the first turning point came in 2017. My boyfriend broke up with me, and then shortly thereafter, my dad passed away. And at that time, I was 37. I had spent 37 years running away from my feelings, stuffing them away, doing everything I could not to feel them. But when you're in such profound grief, it's basically impossible not to feel your feelings. But I didn't have the tools for emotional regulation. So I was just kind of just sitting in these feelings, not knowing what to do with them. So like the rest of the year, I just basically felt like a zombie and didn't know what to do about it. But then the year turned over into 2018. And that's when I kind of got a second wind. And I was like, I'm tired of feeling this way. I want to do something about it. And I was living in Chicago at the time. So I decided that I wanted to move to Hawaii, which was well-intentioned in that I was actually taking agency of my life and not playing the victim and doing something to rectify my feeling of not feeling happy and fulfilled. But it wasn't well intentioned because I was still reaching for something outside of myself to be the thing that made me feel happy. So I moved here, and I will be the first person to say, you cannot move away from your problems. So obviously, the same problems just followed me to a different location. Not only that, I developed a whole new roster of issues because like right off the bat, this was in 2018. So this was before remote work was the trendy thing to do. But I was very fortunate because my job allowed me to move here and work remotely. But right when I moved, there was this huge management shakeup that threatened my role. And again, I like fell back into that victim mentality. And I felt like because remote work was not trendy, I felt like this job was my only opportunity to have a remote job. So instead of looking for another job or doing something about it, I just, for like a year, I was just sat in fear of losing my job. So I was like constantly in survival mode. I also had a really hard time making friends when I first moved here, which was something I had never experienced in Chicago. So being thousands of miles away from anyone I knew, it was super lonely and isolating. And the other thing that happened right off the bat was to prove how committed and all in I was on my decision, I bought a condo like pretty much immediately. But then a month after I closed, a shared pipe in the building backflowed into my bathroom sink and I wasn't home. So my entire condo flooded. So this was all within like the first 3 months of moving here. So because I was grasping for things outside of myself to be happy and everything was falling apart, this was like just the beginning, because the next 2.5 years, it was like thing after thing after thing. Like my grandma died and there was always something. And instead of having that emotional stability to deal with it, I was grasping for these things outside of myself and they were falling apart. So I started falling apart. And then COVID happened. So I don't think I have to describe how that made it worse. But then the straw that broke the camel's back was the end of a relationship during COVID. So in isolation, that would have been hard to deal with. But this was like after 2.5 years of back to back to back to back stressors with no break, which would have drove anyone crazy, to be honest. But I was at a point where, and I think we all have these points in our lives where it's like, I can't handle this because things just become too overwhelming. But layered on top of that feeling was just the sheer feeling of hopelessness because nothing had been going well. And I truly did not see any hope for the future. And that is such a dangerous place to be. So that's when I intentionally overdosed on my anxiety medication.
First, I'm going to take a deep breath. And I want to take that deep breath for the listener because I think your story is not that unique. And I
Correct.
think that the story that you're sharing is going to resonate with a lot of listeners, or at least one listener, right? And that's always the goal. But I've written down so many things. And I'll tell you the words that I wrote down as you were talking. One thing I wrote down was silence over violence. And I've had this concept in my head for a long time where, I've tried to debunk this myth as many times as I can in as many interviews as I can about this idea that trauma does not have to be this overt, in your face, violent, aggressive, abusive situation. Yeah. And I've held space for over 150 clients. I've done over 150 podcast interviews with guests. So I have really exposed myself to so many stories. And the majority of challenge that people hold, because I'm holding space for it, is not feeling seen, heard, valued, significant, understood. Now, can that come from abuse, violence, aggression? Of course it can. And I've heard those stories. But the majority of stories I hear do not involve any abuse, any violence, any aggression, but the child's being adultified or parentified. Or there's parents that are emotionally, not ready to be parents, or they're just emotionally absent, right? So we talk in the space of trauma about emotional neglect being this real, significant measure, but people don't really understand what it means to be emotionally neglected. So the silence over violence has been a concept that's been in my head for a long time because it's equally as damaging. And I don't really like it, actually, when people talk about a big T and a little t. It really is like an irk of mine because it's giving like a rating scale to like a comparative of, well, this stressor was worse than this stressor, or this experience was worse than that experience. But the reality is it doesn't really matter what the experience is. If your body doesn't feel safe, your body doesn't feel safe. And we don't feel safe when we don't feel love, belonging, and connection, period, end of story.
Yeah.
It feels as unsafe as the other things that I've described. So your
Yeah.
body and your mind are going to react the same way. So there's no discrimination. There's no spectrum in the body of safety. It's either you're safe or you're not safe. It's very, very black and white. So this idea of silence over violence and this idea of, emotional neglect being as powerful as actual abuse. It's really important for me to get across to people because people gaslight themselves and they deny themselves their reality if they didn't have abuse, aggression, or violence in their childhood, but yet they feel so stuck. This is why people get so confused. Number one. Number two, you so eloquently arced and illustrated how that experience of silence and not feeling seen, heard, or understood created this core memory, which created these core beliefs that were not true.
Yeah.
I don't matter. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not deserving. And again, I've said this in other shows before with other guests that before the age of 9, 10, 11, the different studies say different ages, but definitely by the time you're 11, your core beliefs are formed.
Yeah.
And your core beliefs are how you view yourself and how you view the world around you. And it really has so much to do with how well you attach to your primary caregivers. So off camera, you and I were talking behind the scenes, and I was talking about how I never had an inner critic.
Yeah.
And that I didn't even know inner critics existed till I was in my late 30s, and my friends were talking about inner critics. I never had a part of me that ever felt unloved or not lovable. That's the more important part. I always knew I was lovable. I just knew the people around me were not capable of doing it the way that I needed. But I also knew it wasn't because of me. That's the difference. When we talk about a core belief, we're saying, I don't believe I'm lovable. In my case, I knew I was fucking lovable. I just knew that the people who were put in charge of me didn't know how to show it in the best way.
And you knew that from a young age?
I had, you know why? And this is
mature.
why. This is why. And this is an important distinction because you were talking about childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say your core beliefs are formed by the time you're 11 years old. My parents divorced when I was 11 years old. My household pre-divorce, I would actually say to any practitioner that asked me what my childhood was like, that was a very safe, very secure, very loving, very comfortable household. Despite the fact that my parents were having marital problems, we were not really privy to it. There was I don't have one memory, not one memory of my parents ever fighting. Never an argument, never a screaming match. There was no screaming, no yelling, no arguing, none of that in my household. It was not a dysregulating household. It was loving, kind, safe, and secure. Was my father present? No, my father traveled a ton. And when my father wasn't home, he wasn't present. And I think that was the issue within that marriage.
Yeah.
And I respect that. I understand the need for that in a spouse. However, as a child, I didn't feel that so much. So my point in all of that is I do believe I grew up with a very strong sense of self and very securely attached to myself.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Right. It was when I turned 12 that my whole fucking world turned upside down.
Yeah.
But I think I was gifted this ability and this gift to be securely attached before it went upside down.
Yes, that makes so much sense.
It took me decades to figure that out. I was so curious. I could never understand why the things that people would say to me at 14, 15, 16, 18 years old that were clearly said to me to knock me down and hurt me by caretakers in my family, it didn't root. I always just thought, are you out of your fucking mind? Like, I always was like, who are you talking to? Like in my head, I was always like that. No. But I can see how it could root if the soil was fertile from it. right? If your soil was like already steeped with not enoughness and you
Yeah.
plant that seed, that shit's going to grow.
Yeah,
But if
because
you're
I was the opposite. If someone said something
that's
to
my
me, I would
point.
absorb that as the truth.
Right. And I'm moderating the four agreements. I've moderated this book so many times, and I'm doing it with this online spiritual gym, which is so cool, called the Line Lab. Anybody should join. And I'm doing the four agreements week by week. So we're just covering one chapter a week, which is such a cool way to do it. And so we were talking about being impeccable with your word. And when people give you an opinion about you, either that soil, to his point, is fertile for it, and you absorb it and you accept that agreement, or you don't. And the first time I ever read it, I actually wrote in the margin, because I didn't understand this still. I read this in 2012. Why would somebody say something to me that I didn't believe?
Mm.
Because I didn't have this knowledge yet. I didn't understand
Yeah.
attachment theory. I didn't understand what it meant to be. None of that was in my purview at 2012. But I knew that that was a truth for me. So I love the fact that you were able to create that illustration and that arc of having emotionally and unpresent parents and having that, what we will call in the space, emotional neglect, whether that was the intention or not, that was the impact.
Yeah.
And how it creates this set of views of yourself of I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, I'm not deserving of, I'm not worthy of. And it does influence everything. And
Yeah.
the other thing I wrote down here was window of tolerance. So as you moved into then your 20s and your 30s, it sounds to me that your window of tolerance was generally narrow. Are you familiar with the window of
I
tolerance?
am, but can you explain what you mean by
Sure.
as it
So, like,
relates to my specific situation?
well, this is my point of view. When we are self led, when we're aligned, when we're grounded, when we're rooted and connected to ourselves, we have a very, very wide window. We are
Oh,
able to emotionally regulate. We're able to see things clearly and concisely. So, your perfect example, it was a perfect example because I use this in my class that I teach on anxiety all the time, where you're saying, I'm in this job, I'm in this role, it's remote, it's before remote work, things are going bad. I've now moved, they're doing something special for me. And now I'm living from this place of fear that I'm on the chopping block. But you already have a sense that I'm not worthy or I'm not deserving of or I'm not enough. And so they're doing me a favor and this is just a dangle and this is going to be taken from me at any time. That's
yes.
coming from a place of a part of you that is insecure. But if
Yes.
you were to go into that insecure and you were more self led and more grounded and more aligned to yourself, you would have not seen it through that lens. So
Yeah.
in right? So in the window of tolerance, my point of view is, even though they don't talk about it, is that from an internal family systems perspective, when we're rooted in self, when we're grounded in self, rooted, that's like grounded and rooted. Okay. When we're grounded or rooted in self, we're in that wide window. When we're fragmented from self, when our light is dimmed, right? So you have an inner glow coach. When our light is dimmed, when we, us being, are shadowed out, that window is narrow. And now we're accessing this very hyper vigilant part, which is I must and I have to, or this very hypo part, which is this lethargic, depressed, where the language is, I just can't anymore. I just can't. So we go
Yeah.
from this, I am awesome and amazing to, holy shit, I'm not. And so therefore I must and I have to, I just can't anymore. And when we get to that, I can't anymore, that's a sign of we're in that hypo-vigilant state of depression, apathy, procrastination, lethargy, no care. I'm done.
Yeah. And I actually, even though I spent most of my time in chronic anxiety, I would kind of switch between the two. I think because like your body can only take so much of either one. So I would just kind of like rotate between the states because being so hyper vigilant all of the time is actually really exhausting. So then I would be depressed and have those like darker thoughts.
Yeah. And I did the same thing. I was in a hypervigilant state, I would say very chronically and very consistently for close to 25 years, which is exhausting. So
Yeah,
to me,
same.
it's like running from the bear analogy. It's like if you are in the woods and you have that neuroception of like, oh my God, there's something behind me. Holy shit, it's a bear. And now you're running, whether there's a bear or not, you sense that there's a threat and you get all that juice inside your body, that adrenaline, that cortisol, all the things that you need, that your autonomic nervous system is kicking into gear. But there's only so long you can run. And at some point, if you can't run it out, your body will basically say, just drop and play dead. If you just drop and
Yeah.
play dead, that's another safety tactic. And that's how I see that hypervigilance and then that hypovigilance of up here, we're running from the bear. And then at some point, we just have to play dead.
Yeah.
And then we start running again. And then we play dead again. And it's this, and unless we can get access back to self, we're in this constant state of dysregulation. Both of them are dysregulated. Even when you're
Yeah.
dropping and flopping, it's not a regulated state. So that was the other thing I wrote down, which I thought
Yeah.
was fascinating.
No, that
And
is
then,
so true. Because on the other side of my healing journey, like I look back at how I used to live and I was like, no wonder I was exhausted all of the time.
right. And then the last thing that I wrote down was not going well. And I love that you said it because you were like, nothing's going well. It wasn't going well. And clearly that window was so narrow, like you didn't have the capacity for it not to be okay. So that's
Yeah.
the important thing for people to understand. When I talk about the window of tolerance, some people call it a window of capacity. This is what's known as like a polyvagal theory, that we all have capability, but our capacity is very diminished when we're in this constant state of threat or this constant state of stress.
Yeah.
And what happens is life is a constant state of stress. Like life is very volatile. It's very unpredictable. It's very uncontrollable. And the problem is when we're entering life with a narrow window, it's a cluster.
Exactly.
When we're entering life with a wider window, we can analyze it a little bit differently and go, okay, that's interesting. Here's some data points. What do I want to do with this information? No matter what the situation is, this is about finding peace in the storm. So when you were saying, nothing was going well, and here's just another thing that was not going well, the reality is that is life. There's no predictability to life. There's no guarantee that because we want it to go this way, that it's going to go this way, or it's going to go just up. It's an up and down roller coaster. So if we don't focus, and this is where I want to move into your work, on widening that window so we have that capacity, we're screwed. So this is like a really good lead in because I want to understand, we were talking about dimming out our light. We were talking about shadowing ourselves out. And I understand that your work helps high achieving women stop dimming their light. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about this glow method and how you went from this suicide attempt to here. How did you arc that? How did you get from there to here? First of all, I think we should cover that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I feel like those are two separate
Yeah,
topics. So
let's do that arc first. So you've attempted to take your life because you got into this I can't zone.
Yes.
And that seemed like the best way to no longer be in the pain.
Correct. It felt in that moment, it felt like the only solution, which,
that's right.
And before I get into the rest of the story, another thing I'd like to point out, because another reason I don't feel like this is talked about enough is because there's like so many stigmas around suicide. And one is that it's selfish, which is very triggering to me because the way I try to describe it to people, and I know not everyone will understand this, but it's like if your leg was cut off and you were bleeding out at your leg, you would be so focused on the pain in your leg, you wouldn't be thinking about like, oh, my family is going to be so sad if I die. You're not thinking about any of that because that's how intense your emotional pain is. So
Yeah.
even though logically right now, I understand that wasn't the only solution, that's not how it feels in that moment. And I've even heard other people say that some people feel like even if they are thinking about their families, they feel like their families would be better off without them.
I've heard this
So,
many times.
yeah. And I say this to people who have had suicidal thoughts and have heard that stigma that it's selfish. But also, I like to spread this message because I feel like there's a term called suicide survivors, which is actually there's suicide attempt survivors and there's suicide survivors. And the survivors are the family and friends of the person who has died. And I feel like sometimes they have a lot of unanswered questions.
Mm,
But I think a lot of times they're taking it way too personally. Like, why weren't they thinking about this? Why weren't they thinking about that? And the truth is, they're just
you're not
so
thinking.
engulfed in their own emotional pain that they're not thinking straight. And that's simply all it is.
Before you go any further, because you're right, it is a stigma topic. If there's a listener listening who's lost someone this way and they don't have those answers, and I know you can't speak for all people, but what would you like people to know about what it feels like to be in that state and
Yeah.
why it would get you to that point?
And again, I would use the like your leg getting cut off analogy. And
Yeah,
again, I know not everyone would understand that, but I just feel like sometimes mental pain or emotional pain is looked at differently than physical pain.
right.
But in that moment, it feels that urgent and dire. And it's really hard to explain. But I feel like if one of my limbs got cut off, I feel like it would be that same fight or flight response where like that's all
Mm,
you can focus on is how much you're hurting and all you want to do is for it to go away.
yeah. So you attempted this by overdosing on anxiety meds.
Yes.
What happened
Um,
next?
so I took an entire bottle of, I believe it's pronounced clonazepam. I feel like I
Yeah.
always mispronounce it,
Hmm.
which is a nervous system suppressant. I was unconscious in my bathroom for a day and a half. I was blacked out, but I somehow managed to text a friend and she took me to the hospital. I spent another day and a half in the hospital. And then I was released from the hospital and I came home and I called a friend. I told her everything that happened. And I ended with, I can't believe I didn't die. And her response was, it's not your time. And that it was so profound and it sent a cold chill down my body because when I took the pills, I was thinking, what is the point of life? Like, I just don't want to be here. But then when she said that, I was like, I think she's right. And I think I have a purpose and I want to figure out what that is. And like, that was like just enough of a hook to give me motivation. And I had I called after the attempt, I call my healing journey in earnest because prior to then, it's like I would read self-help books.
Mm,
I had tried traditional therapy. I had tried some like spiritual modalities. And the problem for me with those things, like for example, books, it like gives you information, but it doesn't really give you any practical advice for how to implement that in your life because
yeah,
it's just like
that
this.
integration.
Yeah, because it's just like this broad stroke general, this is what you do. And so it's hard to like figure out how to implement that into your own specific circumstances. So the self-help books gave me a lot of information, but I didn't know what to do with it. Traditional therapy, at least the therapist I had gone to, it was basically just talk therapy. So it's like it feels good in the moment for when you're talking to that person, but then you leave and it's like, I still feel like shit. And again, they never gave me any practical advice for like how to integrate. So it's like I kind of felt hooked on like the weekly appointments. And then any other modality, it was just like something to feel good in the moment. And then I would leave and I still have all the same problems. So none of
Right.
them were really long-term solutions that I could implement into my life. So I decided, I was like, I need to get help and I need to get help the right way. So I invested in myself and I hired a coach. And he quite literally saved my life.
Mm. And what was it that this coach did? What was the modality that he was using, or what was the approach that he took that was so impactful for you?
The approach, like I could go into all the little things, but the thing that was the most impactful is that like he knew I had all these like things in my head that were holding me back, but he would teach me behaviors. Like, so for instance, we worked on setting boundaries or like how to show up in certain ways. So I would have actionable homework every single week to implement in my life. So then over time, because I was setting boundaries, because I was like showing up in a more confident way, over time, my beliefs were like, yeah, I do deserve to be respected. I do trust myself. And then ultimately, yeah, I do deserve to be loved. I do love myself. And so it
Mm.
was the implementation of these behaviors that actually changed my limiting beliefs, which was, and again, it was like the implementation aspect that was never there for me before.
Yeah. So how did you arc that into what you do today?
So, through my own healing journey, I was in corporate America for over 20 years. And the more I was really stepping into my authenticity and who I really was as a person, I realized how much corporate America was killing my
Right.
soul and
Was
just
not
wasn't,
authentic.
yeah, it was not aligned with who I was because I
Right.
always had to wear the mask. You have to play the games to succeed, that is. And I was the overachiever who always wanted to succeed. And that was another thing. I was trying to get away from this external validation type stuff. But in corporate America, you really can't escape that. So I finally got to the point where I was physically and mentally ill from my job in corporate America. So I quit and I became an inner glow coach because I know there are other women who struggle with the things I used to struggle with. So I'm like, let's get them help. Let's
And
change
listen,
the
your
world.
story is not unique in the sense that, you know, again, our nervous system becomes so, on overdrive when we're in environments where we are not authentically aligned.
Yes.
I just got a new client the other day and I said, why did you come to me? What is it that you want to work on? And it was so brilliant what she said. She goes, I am not the main character of my own life.
Mm.
And I was like, ding, da, ding, ding. Like, we are so parts led here, right? Like, I don't know who I am, but I know I'm not showing up.
Yeah.
And, when we're doing that, and I hear this so often about people in corporate America, when we're doing this, we literally become sick because our nervous system is so on overdrive. And when our nervous system is on overdrive, our immune system begins to collapse.
Yes.
And so when we hear people say things like, this job is making me sick, I always think two things. Is the environment toxic? Because God, no, we know in corporate America that there are many toxic environments, but it's also looking at how are we working within that environment? Are we working from a place of abundance? And I know I'm a good person and I know I'm good enough and everything I'm doing is with best intention and good enough? Or am I coming into it, like we talked about, from a place of scarcity, which is I'm not enough. And at any time, I'm going to get the guillotine and get axed. And I'm on this hustle, which I think corporate America actually is completely feeding off of. Right.
Oh, for sure.
So it's, you have this dichotomy happening. So you obviously had this experience. You've already had this very, I'm going to label it unique experience where you had this transformation at such an extreme point. So tell me how you took all of that. What is it that you created and who is it for?
Yes. So my inner glow coaching, the program I'm offering right now is called Shine from the Inside. The basic concept of this is that we're all born with this light inside of us, but
Mm-hmm.
there's society systems, family systems, school systems, and slowly our light starts getting dim because we're trying to conform to all of these systems. But if you think about it, like for example, corporate America, it's just all these arbitrary rules that people are following. And it's like, who
Yeah.
came up with this? And why are we like, because a lot of the rules don't make sense. They might have at some point in the past, but they don't make sense now, but we're all just blindly following them and it dims our light. Like just the one example of corporate America, like I was in a not only was corporate America itself draining me, but I was also in a very toxic situation. So we get in these situations that dim our lights. And another thing with, self-help books and stuff like that, it's marketed as like fixing yourself or changing yourself. But what my coaching program teaches is just coming back home to yourself,
100.
because you've been buried under all this conditioning and trying to reach for things outside of yourself. So that's what my GLOW method is based on. And GLOW is an acronym. So G stands for go back to your childhood, because again, a lot of modalities, not all, there are amazing coaches and therapists, but a lot are just kind of like band-aid solutions to feel good in the moment. But G, go back to your childhood, is, to your point earlier, like your main things happen from your developmental years. So it's like, go back to your developmental years, figure out what that thing is, and work from there. And
Yeah.
that's where you can come up with these lasting solutions instead of band-aid solutions. And L stands for light yourself up, because immediately we will start rekindling your light. Because the first thing, if most women, when I ask them, like, well, what lit you up when you were 6 years old? A lot of women don't even remember, because they're just so disconnected from the things
Yeah.
that light them up. So the very first thing we start working on is light yourself up, because that is like such a quick win. And that's something you can just continuously build on as we go and then take beyond the coaching program. And then O, which is a huge component, is overcome external validation. Because
Mm,
again, we get so wrapped up in like performing and chasing things outside of ourselves. But when your home base is that light inside of you, then like nothing outside can shake you. Because
that's
again,
right.
my issue before was I was grasping all these things outside of myself. But now I'm so solid in myself that, the world can be falling apart outside of me. And that's not to say I'm not going to be stressed or whatever, but it's not going to make me fall apart. And then W stands for welcome yourself back home, because again, it's not about fixing yourself. It's just coming back home to who you really are as a person.
And what is the GLOW method? Is it a training? Is it a coaching? Is it
Yeah, it's
self-led?
just,
Tell me how it works.
it's the whole process of, because it's dependent on person, but a lot of women, they're like seeking this external validation. So it's learning how to set boundaries, learning how to listen to your intuition and not asking your friends or checking your horoscope, and just basically being more grounded in yourself. So it's the components of the entire process as a whole.
And that's something that people do with you one-on-one?
Yes, it is a one-on-one program, because I
I
feel
love
like
it.
that, yeah, that gives the best results.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. So I want to just, first of all, acknowledge how beautiful this journey has been for you, albeit incredibly painful, obviously.
Yeah.
But, this is the thing. I always say that, life is a series of experiences that are divinely designed for us. And I'm not a religious person. I don't say divine from a scripture. It's much more of there's something bigger than us. And I used to say life is a series of challenges, but I think all experiences are of value, are good, things that we label as good and as challenging. But when we can have the opportunity to pull back and look at a situation and say, what am I supposed to be taking from this? What am I supposed to be learning from this? What is the gift in this challenge? What is the purpose in this pain? Like your friend saying to you, it wasn't your time.
Yeah.
There is purpose in pain, and that is my personal point of view, but we're so comforted sometimes by the pain. The pain feels like a warm blanket, honestly, sometimes, especially
Yeah.
if this is what we've been in for so long. We're afraid to give it up. So we just continue to create more of it for ourselves. So we get to pull back the layers on that and say, why is this comforting? Why do I keep finding myself in this position? What's the purpose of this? What can I do with it? So the fact that you took it from A to Z is really a testament to you, honestly. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that.
Thank you so much. And a huge part of that was actually flipping my mindset,
Yeah.
because, in hindsight, I had such a victim mentality of like these things are happening to me and I didn't feel like I had any agency over it. But then I switched to feeling like I had agency. And to your point, I started looking at some things in my life and it's like, oh, I actually caused this, because something that came to my mind when you were just talking is I used to get anxiety about feeling good because I was
Oh,
waiting for
yeah.
that other shoe to drop. And that just turned into a cycle of self-sabotage whenever I felt good. And to face some of those things was hard, but it completely changed my life because now I don't do that. And if I feel good, I just appreciate the feeling because that's all it is.
One of my favorite podcasters is Steve Bartlett, and he has the podcast Diary of a CEO.
Yeah, I love
I
him.
think I really love his podcast because he just covers the gamut, like
Yeah.
mental health professionals, AI experts. Like there's just always something you can learn, right? And I'm also like relatively obsessed with Brene Brown since I read Daring Greatly in
Oh, yeah.
2012. So I saw this week that he launched his interview with Brene, and I was like, oh, this is just, I mean, my husband was at basketball. I literally grabbed popcorn and like put it on a 70-inch TV. I was like, let's just watch this podcast. And she talks so eloquently about this so often, which is vulnerability. Like joy is the most vulnerable emotion we can have.
Mm,
It is the most vulnerable thing. And if you think about it from, at least from my seat and where I do parts work, when we're in joy, we're not armored up. When we're in joy, the gatekeepers are not at the gate. When we're
yeah.
in joy, our parts are taking a freaking bath or they're reclining in their, lazy boys. Like they're not activated. When we're in joy, we're unprotected. And so that's very vulnerable. And so we like to forebode joy by
Yeah.
creating that sabotage or creating that thought because it feels so alarming to be unencumbered by all of these protective layers. But yet, if we can expose ourselves to it, it's like intoxicating.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but it's a scary place to be for so many people, especially if they have really strong protective layers. Those protective layers are like, what are you crazy? Like we're not going anywhere. And so you're not going to get access to that light. Like that, we're not going to do that. So even if they get a taste of it, they'll find a way to pull themselves back out because it just feels so scary. Right now, talking of scary, I mentioned in the beginning that you have, jumped out of helicopters, Navy SEAL style, right? So I have here that you've done incredibly brave things like skydiving and jumping out of helicopters, but that you were still terrified of being seen. Are you still terrified of being seen?
Sometimes.
Okay.
So that's the fear of allowing myself to be seen, obviously also stems from my childhood
Yeah.
because I grew up in a very critical environment. So it felt safer to just not be seen
Right.
because then I won't be criticized, which of course was not true because I was still criticized, but it still was slightly safer than
Or
shining
it's
my
the
light.
perception of control
Exactly.
of not putting myself in a possible position of at least creating it for myself.
Yes.
Right?
And pre-attempt, I had this mindset because I didn't consider myself a courageous person at that time. So I had this mindset that courage was lack of fear. So whenever I saw someone else doing something courageous or whatever, I just thought they were fearless and
Mm,
didn't have any feelings about it. And then in my own healing journey, I learned that most people are afraid when doing courageous things, but the magic is feeling that fear and doing it anyway. So I actually don't consider myself an adventurous person, but I have bungee jumped, I have skydived, I have jumped out of a helicopter, and I do these things to intentionally practice feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Because especially with bungee jumping, if I speak in person or do something where I am terrified to allow myself to be seen, I can just tell myself, I've been bungee jumping and this is
yeah.
so much less scary than bungee jumping. So, like I can trust myself to do it because I've intentionally have put myself in these other scary situations.
And I think it's important for people to understand this too. Like, even as coaches, even as speakers, there are going to be parts of us that still have fear. Like, we're not fully healed just because we're helping you on your healing
Yeah,
journey. Like, let's be honest, we're not robots. Everyone's on a healing journey until their last day. And so
exactly.
I love that, though. I will say absolute hell to the no. I will never, ever bungee jump or skydive or ever jump out of a helicopter. You know what it is for me? It's a lack of trust because I love my life so much. And I'm so not convinced that like the cord won't snap or that like my parachute will not open, that I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm not a big risk taker with my body. I'll do it in my business all day long, but like, that's a
Well,
hard no for me.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, you probably have other ways of getting out of your comfort zone, but I also like how you framed that, because there's other situations I won't put myself in because I'm like, no, that's too dangerous and I can't trust that I'm not okay.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're actually basing it on self-trust and that I'm not certain that I'm not okay and I'm not going to put myself in a dangerous situation, that's actually a very healthy mindset for making that decision, because you
Yeah.
shouldn't just do dangerous
It's
things.
not
You
just
should,
out of like fear.
yeah,
I mean, the fear is that I would die, like, and
yeah.
not because, like, not for any other reason of like, maybe the parachute doesn't open and I'm like jumping out of the air, or I don't know, maybe the thing that the bungee cord is hanging on snaps. Like, nope.
In all fairness, another thing my experience has done to me, I no longer have a fear of dying. I'm just kind of at a point
Oh,
where,
yeah.
because of my friend's statement, I feel like we all do have a purpose and a predetermined expiration date. So I'm at the point, because I surf and some people are like, well, aren't you afraid of sharks or whatever? And I'm at the point, like, because I'm not afraid of dying. I'm like, if I die by getting attacked by a shark, then that's how I die.
Listen, I love that because here's the thing. I'm okay. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm
Yeah.
not ready to die. Like,
But I think that's a healthy fear if
that's
you are, though. I'm not like
that's
criticizing
the difference, because the
that.
reality is, like, I'm so excited about this next chapter of my
Yeah.
life. My kids are like almost 17 and 21. Like, we're moving into this next phase. We're planning on moving to a new state. Like, we have all these things. We're so excited to travel. Like, we've got all these plans, and like, I'm really looking forward to it. So, the part of me that's like, yeah, no, on that is really the part of like, oh, I don't want to miss out on all these really exciting things I have planned. And again, I just don't trust the cord. So like, I know I'm going to die. Like, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to do it right now because like
Well,
I'm at a good place and I really want to like enjoy what's about to come out.
so this is my theory on that. It's not your time, so that's your protective mechanism to not put
Totally.
yourself in a dangerous situation.
But you know what? To your point, it's all predetermined in my mind, and my time could be tomorrow. Like, I
All
don't
of us,
know.
though. Yeah.
I don't know, but the reality is I am excited about the fact that hopefully it's not tomorrow, and it's not for like, I'm 53 years old. Hopefully not for like another 35, 40 years. Like, I've got plans ish
Yeah.
in my head. So I would like to see those to fruition if that's the plan that I'm unprivy to. So what's the story behind? I want to talk a little bit about your book. So you wrote this
Mhm.
book. It's a memoir. It's called
Yes.
Running in Slippers. Tell us about the book. What's the story and the meaning behind the title?
Well, running in slippers, first of all, I live in Hawaii and we call flip flop slippers. So it
Okay.
really means running in flip flops. And how that title came about is in the introduction of the book. So I won't give that away. But overall, it's a metaphor for life, because running in flip flops, it can be adventurous, playful, and fun. It can also be dangerous, scary, and difficult, and maybe painful. So overall, it's a metaphor. And I also consider that my brand, because my brand is just about real life. But the story in the book, it begins when my boyfriend broke up with me and my dad passed away. And it goes way into more detail of the story I told in the beginning. It takes you through my attempt and a little bit on the other side of when I finally got help and started to turn things around.
Well, it's a brilliant title. I love it. As we wrap up, what's a key message that you want to leave with anyone who's struggling with not feeling enough?
The message I always want to reiterate is that you are worthy of living a happy and fulfilling life. Because again, I spent a lot of my life not believing that was true. So I didn't feel good, and I didn't even feel like that was available to me. And I feel like there's a lot of other people in that situation. So not only are you worthy of having a happy and fulfilling life, it is available to you.
I don't disagree. You just got to be looking for it. I'm loving having you on. This has been such a great conversation, and I want to share with people how they can learn more about what you do. Guys, Angie is offering a free 60-minute Find Your Glow session for our listeners. Angie, how can people find that information about the free Find Your Glow session?
It is on my website, runninginslippers.com, which also has information about my book. There's information about my coaching program. You can book that call. And what it is, it's a 60-minute call. We can work on whatever you're struggling with. And most, if not all calls, we have a breakthrough, because again, we go back to your childhood and figure out what that limiting belief is. So usually we can uncover that within the 60-minute call. And then at the end, I will give recommendations for going forward. And my coaching program and me are not for everyone, and I fully acknowledge that. So if it's not a good fit, I know other coaches, I have other resources that I can refer you to. So the entire goal of the call is to get you help, because again, I know people are struggling with this and it is hard to find quality help. So I'm here to help you, whether it's me or someone else.
Have very, very similar philosophies, because I also, I do consultations, and the goal of the consultation is to give somebody a safe landing space, hold that space, and then at the end of the day, let them feel what their comfort level is. And I'm not for everyone, right? So like
Yeah.
I might, now that I know a little bit more about your method and I know it's very aligned, but you have a certain energy, I have a certain energy, I think really, really great coaches, they're not in it for themselves, in the sense that like we really do care that the person gets the support that's best custom lined up for them. And if we sense it's not us, we at least will know, because we're always networking with other people in the space, what might be the best fit. And that really, to a testament of a good coach, that's really a real good true sign that you're in safe hands with someone, right? Because
Okay.
our goal is to leave that impact. It's not to, take all the business all the time. Like there's plenty to go around. You will find the person that's perfectly aligned for us. So guys, here's the thing. Our rock bottom moments, they can crack us wide open. But as you can see in Angie's case, they can also become the catalyst for a radical and beautiful transformation. Many people learn to dim their light. That is really common. And they are afraid of being loved. But true healing is really about loving yourself for who you are, not what you do. And that inner glow can change everything. So I'm really hoping that this conversation moved you. And if it did, please share it. And more importantly, please subscribe to Flip Your Mindset. We have a lot of listeners, but not everybody always subscribes. I always bring you guys stories to help you create understanding, because as you know, I always say we cannot heal what we don't understand. And the first goal is to be true to yourself. So again, so great. Thank you so much, Angie, for joining us. I really have enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, remember, you cannot heal what you don't understand. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.